Hello. It is the year 2026. It is the 1st of January here in Poland, 2 a.m. We're about to delve into a heavy topic since the call to make the topic of the kidnapped children more relevant and relevant. I've decided to hop on stream at least once per day to do at least a single topic dedicated to the kidnapping and militarization of Ukrainian children, what that means, and give updates on the situation. As we have learned recently, it is possible that the retrieval of Ukrainian children will prove to be impossible. Russia is a very specific country to negotiate with. The United States have become all but allies to Russia. And there is also a far more vicious aspect to the kidnapping of Ukrainian children. Because when we discuss the topic of the kidnapping as well as how the Russia's education system is structured, the question that comes to mind very naturally, probably to many people, is why does Russia even do it? Why does Russia kidnap Ukrainian children? And why does Russia then continue to militarize the children? We are going to answer these questions as well as continue to try to predict what that means for Russia's future policy. I guess we're gonna start by watching a video here. Here.
Let's get these kids home. Thank you.
To show how important this is, we allowed members of the House to come to the Senate. Michael, you're up.
Well, Chairman, it's great to be in the House of Lords, the upper chamber. It took a while to walk over here. But I do want to thank you and the ranking member, Schatz, for holding this important hearing and having us from the House who care about this issue deeply. And we've been following this for quite some time. And you're putting a spotlight on this. And I can't say thank you enough. And I agree with you. In these peace talks that are going on right now, Russia needs to understand these children must come home. They must.
Russia has no intent of returning any of the kidnapped children. This has to be understood. The fact that President Zelensky has said during one of his recent appearances that there is absolutely no guarantee that the children will be removed, would be returned, should create a picture for you as to what, if the president of Ukraine is doubtful if the children will be returned, then that is a very bad sign for the negotiations. The politicians can talk big about how Russia has to understand that the children have to be removed, but if no real pressure is put on Russia to do so, then Russia will never do it. The United States has no interest in putting any pressure on Russia when it comes to things that are considered as more pressing, a serious matter by the international community. We have to understand that by the standards of states, their interests, and what they want to achieve, the kidnapped Ukrainian children are not considered a high priority. It is not considered a hard thing. It is considered a soft security threat rather than a hard security threat, which means that a lot of different things will be pushed for before the return of Ukrainian children, if even it will be pushed for at all, which is of course a huge strategic mistake by the West. It is a huge strategic mistake by Europe in particular, but it is a short-sightedness that in particular Western Europe cannot get rid of. It cannot get rid of this mentality of thinking that Russia is a rational actor that can be reasoned with, and that some sort of an agreement can be arrived at in which Russia will suddenly decide not to be an aggressive country, to come back to business as usual, and will forget about its ambitions when it comes to conquest. A lot of evidence shows that the contrary is true, and the kidnapping of children is one of such indicators, which we will be examining later. Continue watch this video.
Must be repatriated with their families. We need an ironclad security agreement, unlike the 94 Budapest Agreement that didn't have that. And as I passed the wartime supplemental in the House, passed by the Senate, Russia needs to pay for its own crimes in the Repo Act. I met with the Ukraine ambassador yesterday, showed me a video that Save Ukraine put together featuring these children and describing the Russian atrocities. The Russian Federation has abducted at least 20,000 children.
Between 20 and 30,000 children, unaccompanied children, because we have to remember that the children are divided into two separate groups. The unaccompanied children, which were children taken from orphanages, from houses in the combat zones. And then we have the accompanied children that lived in the occupied territory. There are over 1 million such children living in occupied territories as we speak. They are being deported deeper into Russia and militarized and Russified. And that number of children living in the occupied territories cannot be forgotten. Those children are very rarely talked about, probably because it's a very inconvenient topic, considering that the United States, as we speak, is pushing for Ukraine to give up even more territory, which would result in even more people finding themselves under Russian occupation.
That we know of, and every expert I've talked to believes the number's higher, much higher than that. They are also indoctrinating and militarizing Ukrainian children in the occupied territories, possibly up to 1 million.
Not just in the occupied territories. The kidnapped children, the unaccompanied children are absolutely also being militarized. The militarization does not end at Ukrainian children. Russia also militarizes Russian children. That is, of course, well known and documented. The militarization of children is something that is countrywide, regardless of ethnicity, and it is a broader strategy by Russia. The building of highly sophisticated paramilitary organizations for the youth, and streamlining the process of children going from school to the military to the front line.
According to the video, Russia has allocated $7 billion in its 26-28 budget for a national project titled Youth and Children, essentially militarized youth organizations. The ambassador told me again that 1 million...
For example, UNARMIA. UNARMIA would be one of those organizations that have a very high level of prestige. A lot of Russian celebrities, sports people, singers, actors are involved in this project in order to give it an allure, in order to give it glamour, in order to make it seem cool to children that join it, in order to be more, in order to up their social status among their peers. It is Russia has invested a lot into the UNARMIA project, and unfortunately, it is a project that has been highly successful. UNARMIA is very successful among the youth in Russia, and unfortunately, it is also a ticket for Ukrainian kidnapped children for better treatment. Ukrainian children often face bullying from their peers, mockery for speaking Ukrainian, mockery for their Ukrainian accent when they speak Russian. But once they enter organizations like UNARMIA, things change drastically. Children gain esteem among their peers. Children gain much better treatment from their teachers. Their life quite literally turns around, seemingly for the better, once they enter those paramilitary organizations and become part of the pipeline to, once again, from school to military to frontline.
Million children live in the occupied territories, vulnerable to brainwashing and abuse, and more than 43,000 have already enrolled in Russia's paramilitary youth program. And I think really most frightening to me is in these territories, the textbooks spew false information and conspiracy theories about NATO and the free world. All this is part of Russia's effort to turn future generations against Ukraine, the United States, and Europe, because in their words, they are preparing for a large-scale war against NATO. It will not end at Donbass and the land bridge to Crimea.
Just so we understand, this militarization, this policy of trying to engage the youth, not just kidnapped Ukrainian youth, but also Russian youth in the military, speaks to a long-term project, speaks to long-term thinking, and of course, it speaks to the fact that Russia's goals, Russia's ambitions do not start nor end with Vladimir Putin. Many people put forward this naive notion that if Vladimir Putin died, if his rule would come to an end, then probably reform would happen, some better form of government would take place, and Russia would change course. A lot of evidence points to the contrary. A lot of evidence points to the fact that Russia is preparing to stay course long after Vladimir Putin is gone. A lot of evidence seem to indicate that children who are very young now are being prepared in the future to join the military and the military operations against Russia's enemies. Let's finish watching this video and then we will address the two questions that have been asked at the beginning of this, which are, why is Russia kidnapping children, and why is Russia militarizing those children.
We have to be clear-eyed in these negotiations. Some of these children's parents have been threatened and giving up their kids. They're shipped to Russia, stripped of their identities, tortured, forced to memorize propaganda, and told their country and their own families are the enemy. Finally, many of them are sent to the front lines of the Russian war itself. Imagine a child age 16 being sent to the front lines to fight against their own homeland. And Mr. Chairman, in the documentary Children in the Fire, I'd recommend everybody watch this. They show a child in a prison where adults use electrodes to shock them under their fingernails and genitals. And I hate to even say that in public. It is so horrific. No child should ever have to endure that kind of barbarism. And to me, it's good versus evil, and this is evil in its purest form. And like the chairman, I've met with a lot of these survivors. I've met with many of them who were sent to Russian camps, and they described the forced indoctrination and the torture. As a father of 5, as you mentioned, Mr. Chairman, I can't imagine any of my children being kidnapped and indoctrinated against the United States of America. And imagine how Americans will feel if that happened to them. I'm thankful, Chairman Grant, for your leadership, calling attention to this important issue. And I agree that any peace must include the repatriation of these children, and it must include
I am muted. How long have I been muted? Oh. Well, I just said that Zelensky has indicated that the peace talks trajectory does not indicate that the return of the children is guaranteed in the slightest. I was talking about how I actually lost it. If the president of Ukraine is saying that the return of the children is not guaranteed, then that is a strong indicator that the peace negotiations is not concerned with this topic. Even when the peace plan had 28 points, and especially when it had been trimmed down to the 20 points, there was no indication, there was no sign of a strong will, none of the points in the show pointed towards a guarantee of the children being returned. This is treated as a very soft security matter by the international community. Only Ukraine seems to be highly interested in return of their children. Russia is absolutely not interested in that. And as I've said just moments ago, I think I said that when I was muted, some of these children are impossible to return. It is impossible to retrieve the children that have been kidnapped at the age of infancy. Those children are not identifiable by any physical features. Children at young infancy all look very, very similar. It is just impossible to look at a young infant and say, yes, this is the child kidnapped from this or that family. It's impossible. Russia would actually need to show goodwill and say, okay, these infants are from Ukraine, we will return them. And as we know, Russia will never, ever do that. Russia will never do that. Russia will never agree to do such a thing.
Include the ironclad security agreement. We cannot repeat the mistakes of the past. Unfortunately, the reporting I'm seeing out of Moscow shows Ukraine making concessions while Putin has made none.
Hello, Happy New Year. Of course, this is not a very Happy New Year topic, but I've decided that every single day if I do a stream, I have to do at least one topic regarding the kidnapped children, since this is one of the most underreported topics. This is one of the topics that is least talked about, and it's actually one of the most important topics. It is treated as one of the least important topics, but long term, it is one of the most crucial topics. Even if the international community, even if the allied states treat this as a pretty soft issue, I would say that long term, it indicates a very dangerous trajectory on the side of Russia, one that is very much overlooked, especially in these peace talks. How do you square the fact that Donald Trump says that Vladimir Putin wants peace? He wants to return to business as usual. He does not want to continue to attack its neighbors, Russia's neighbors. But at the same time, Russia is engaging in an aggressive policy of militarization of children.
That is no surprise. I think he will drag this out. He will continue his behavior, including the kidnapping and abuse of the children, until pressure is placed on him and he's forced to be stopped. We must hold those responsible accountable and ensure this ends not only for Ukraine's sake, but for our own sake and for the world. Russia's attempt to re-engineer an entire generation is a battle plan. In their words, they are preparing children for war against NATO. This is a national security imperative, and beyond that, it's a moral imperative. And this is a time, all of us on both sides of the aisle, for moral clarity, because history will judge us by what we do here and now. And it will judge us how we respond today. So, again, Mr. Chairman, thank you for holding this important hearing. I look forward to working with you in this committee.
Thank you, Congressman.
So this question has been answered partially in this video. Both questions has been partially answered in this video. The first question being, why does Russia kidnap children to begin with, Ukrainian children? And the first obvious answer is that Russia is dealing with a very big demographic crisis. And in order to bolster the population of Russia, it kidnaps children of what the ethnic nationalists of Russia see as similar people, ethnically similar, genetically similar, culturally similar, linguistically similar, and to create Russian citizens out of them in order to bolster the population and combat the demographic crisis. That is one answer as to why Russia is kidnapping the children, but it is a not complete one. That answer is definitely not complete and does not address the question as to why then Russia is so aggressively militarizing not just Ukrainian children that are kidnapped from the Ukrainian territories, but also why is Russia so aggressively militarizing Russian children as well? And the answer to that is it is a long-term preparation for conflict. You do not do an aggressive militarization campaign directed at a whole generation of children if you do not plan to go to war. And we are looking at a situation in which, in the future, Russia's very aggressive campaign to create soldiers will simply result in a rate of mobilization with which NATO will not be able to compete without implementing some aggressive policies of its own. And that is something that is extremely overlooked by the West. The West treats the topic of children as something not of great importance, not of great priority, not seeing that it is a part of a bigger policy of war, definitely not peace. You cannot say that you want to have peace on the one hand, that you do not plan invasion, but on the other hand, preparing thousands upon thousands of children to enter the military at a young age. There is no reason to do that unless you plan conflict in the future. We have here the US could stop the militarization of children. I don't think it will. I think that pressuring Russia to stop doing anything, let alone the militarization of children, is very much not in the interest of Donald Trump's cabinet. I think that we would have to see a shakeup on the United States political theater, in the political theater of the United States, in order for it to hold this procedure. Since 2022, Moscow has intentionally kidnapped at least 20,000 children, unaccompanied children, and these numbers are probably much higher. Experts estimate the number to be much higher. There we go. Many are forced to join the Russian military and fight their own country. All males in occupied Ukraine received draft notices to join the Russian army at 17. Russia's policy to militarize Ukrainian children is evil, morally corrupt, and anti-Christian. But at this scale, it also poses a security threat to Washington and NATO countries. Here is why. Since Russia's full-scale invasion of Ukraine in 2022, Moscow's federal annual expenditures on youth policy have increased by 66% to $850 million this year in 2025. So once again, if Russia wants peace, if Russia really wants to not just end this war, but not to start any future wars against its neighbors, then why has the policy of militarizing the youth increased? Why has the budget for the militarization of the youth been increased by 66%, no less? Is it to prepare for peace, for a lasting peace and stability? No, it's to prepare for war. It is clearly to prepare for conflict. The federal budget allocation for the movement of the first, one of the largest organizations responsible for the militarization of youth, exceeded the entire federal budget allocation for Kalmykia, which is one of Russia's poorest regions and dependent on Moscow. Such a splurge is part of Russia's new central policy, which aims to increase the proportion of patriotic, i.e. militarized and ready to fight for Russia youth to 70%. 70%. And it's working. Since 2022, Moscow has opened more than 300 cadet classes in Ukraine's occupied regions. At least 160,000 Ukrainian children have already been enrolled in military movements, and this number continues to grow. You see what I mean? Do you see what I mean when I say this? According to the current peace plan, the one trimmed down to 20 points, the Ukrainian army would be reduced to 800,000 troops. So take that into perspective, that at least 160,000 Ukrainian children in occupied territories have been enrolled into militarization programs. And that's in occupied territories alone. There is the topic of the 20 to 30,000 kidnapped children that have been brought to Russia, that have brought to the motherland in order to be Russified and, of course, militarized. At the same time, Russia persists in indoctrinating other Ukrainian children, sending tens of thousands into notorious summer camps that masquerade as recreation while teaching children to dig trenches. These efforts are set to be scaled up. In 2026, Russia plans to finish the construction of its largest military camp in occupied Ukraine, a 27-acre camp called Warrior in Mariupol. There has been a lot of videos circulating about how finally Mariupol is free from Ukraine's grasp. Finally, Mariupol is rebuilding better than ever. Finally, life is returning to Mariupol better than before. Russian, part of the Ruski Mir. And it is interesting that the same Mariupol is now being used to facilitate the building of the largest military camp in occupied Ukraine. Donald Trump says that Vladimir Putin is ready for peace, that he wants to get it done, that he wants Ukraine to succeed, which was a very interesting statement. While Russia is very openly, without hiding anything, building new facilities to facilitate the militarization of children to prepare them for future conflict. I do not know how the West very comfortably tries to square that circle. How the West keeps talking about concessions with Russia, peace with Russia, how Russia does not need to be pressured into a more peaceful position. No, Russia can be just talked to and a very good peaceful agreement can be achieved. Russia's economy should be rebuilt. Russia should be receiving funds in order to be able to dig for rare earth minerals together with the United States, refine them, new sources of income. And in the meantime, Russia is preparing children for war. During a recent Senate hearing, Katerina Rashevska, legal expert at Ukraine's Regional Center for Human Rights, broke the news that Russia has taken some Ukrainian children to military camps in North Korea. There, children are taught to destroy Japanese militarists and meet Korean War veterans who attacked the US fleet in the 1960s. These early stories indicate that Russia is preparing its future army to fight not only Ukrainians, but the whole world. Putin is partnering with America's enemies to do so. It is also important to note, apart from the kidnapped Ukrainian children, that the Russian youth that attends school is forced increasingly to meet with the veterans of the so-called special military operation and to learn from them, to listen to their guidance, to listen from them how life should be lived, to be encouraged to join the Russian military in the future. That is definitely a thing that I have also heard from the psychologists, the experts that work with rescued children, that military veterans enter schools, they talk to the children about the glamour, about the beauty of joining the Russian military. They also talk to the children about death. They persuade the children that they assure the children that while death might seem scary as a concept, it is actually very much not, and that there is nothing greater that a person can achieve than to die for the glory of Russia. That is actually a thing that is being told to the Russian children as well as kidnapped Ukrainian children by those veterans that visit the schools. But the path of militarization has been shortened for Ukrainian children. They no longer have to go to Russia, Belarus, or North Korea. Over the last 4 years, the Kremlin strategy has evolved. In 2022, children were forcibly taken from Ukraine to re-education facilities elsewhere. Today, Russia is focused on building military camps inside Ukraine, which this process is getting much easier and would get a much more easier if Russia would receive even more territory. I don't think I have to explain that. In 2024, 3 branches of the military center Warrior were opened in occupied regions of Ukraine. Approximately 1.6 million children still remain in the occupied territories of Ukraine, and Russia is determined to militarize them and all of those who come after them. 1.6 million children is 2 times more than the maximum amount of allowed Ukrainian military should the 20-point peace plan come to pass. The peace plan assumes that allows for 800,000 troops to be stationed in Ukraine, while already we're looking at 1.6 million children alone. This is just from occupied territories alone to be militarized for future conflict. The available evidence suggests that Russia intends to expand dramatically its militarization of youth, as it needs more men to keep the war machine going. At the current pace, we can expect that some 500,000 Ukrainian children will be militarized and bred to serve in the Russian army over the next 5 years. Again, if Russia really wants peace, if Russia really wants security in the region, then why militarize 500,000 Ukrainian children and prepare them for war? Russia's approach to military recruitment cannot be matched by NATO and its allies. Moscow's aggressive policy to increase its military manpower means the Western alliance is facing not only a major militarization campaign comparable to this scale only to the Nazis' Hitler Youth, but also a real national security risk. As Washington attempts to broker the talks between Russia and Ukraine, it should keep in mind that it may be more efficient and, needless to say, morally right to save Ukrainian children from Russian captivity now than to face them on the battlefield in 5 years. Ukrainian children will be the first to be deployed if Russia invades NATO. Indeed, Ukrainian children who were militarized in 2014, because we must remember that the kidnapping of children has begun in 2014, when Russia took over the Donbass, have already been killed as Russian soldiers since the full-scale war in 2022. Policy must follow. Russia's policies against Ukrainian children are the actions of a terrorist state that jeopardize our security and peace. Since Russia does not shy away from taking Ukrainian children to North Korea, one of the 4 countries designated by the United States as a state sponsor of terrorism, it deserves the same designation, especially when the bill enjoys substantial bipartisan support already. So we have managed to answer both questions. The first one being, why does Russia kidnap Ukrainian children? And the second question being, what is the purpose of the aggressive militarization policy that Russia is engaging in towards those kidnapped children? But Russia built a school-to-trenches conveyor belt for children. Is the West ready? Western policymakers often treat soft humanitarian concerns, such as returning Ukrainian children from Russia, as separate from hard security issues, like future defense guarantees for Ukraine. In reality, these cannot be disentangled. What happens to the children taken to Russia or living under occupation is fundamental to the long-term security of Ukraine and Europe. Russia's systematic indoctrination and militarization of both its own and Ukrainian youth reveals not only its intention to prolong the conflict, but also its blueprint for sustaining a long-term flow of loyal combat-ready soldiers. I take a swimsuit and they take us to the camp. I stand and look, where is the sea? Where is the rest? Katya told Save Ukraine. One soldier laughs. Who told you that you would come to the sea to rest? No, you came to the military camp. And that is the reality of the situation. That is also something that I want to focus on very heavily this year. This is one of the topics that I want to really work on when I go to Ukraine early this month, on the militarization of Ukrainian children, and to drive home how this process is being implemented, how it's being perpetrated, and what the experience of the children with that is. And of course, I would like to further talk with doctors, psychologists, and experts that work with children to been rescued from that system. So this stream has been a little bit of a reminder, a little bit of an intro of continuous segments that I will be doing probably every day moving forward on the topic of the militarization of and kidnapping of Ukrainian children. Okay. I have done my New Year's bit. Any questions? I think that this topic genuinely might trigger some questions, so if anybody has any to ask, then feel free. Feel free to ask any questions. That you might have on the topic. It's very much I'm gonna do a little poll. Okay. That is actually the main thing that I wanted to do on stream today. To talk about the kidnapped children. Again. Because the topic is very, very much neglected. Unfortunately. Very grim reality. Very, very grim reality. Hatred toward Ukraine. Russian school children forced to interact with the special military operation veterans. Students are also intimidated by claims that Ukrainian diplomats are allegedly not recognized worldwide, while some students are threatened with being sent to the front for poor academic performance. Despite these efforts by Russia's propaganda apparatus, many school children continue to seek ways to enroll in Ukrainian universities and leave the occupied territories. Probably will be doing this regularly on the new channel as well once I launch it. Sometimes this week. Oh yeah, I'm gonna be launching all this stuff this week as well. That is a promise. I am almost ready. Okay. All right. I guess I've... Oh, someone press someone. I am very still. What do you mean? What do you mean by very still? Oh, yeah. Sorry. My apologies. The war will drag on unless the West gets its act together. Well, I guess the title should be changed to The War Will Drag On, because I am very positive that actually the West will not get its act together. It's not an if, okay? The West will not get its act together. I have zero hope, I have zero expectation of the West getting its act together. I think it's pretty obvious at this point.
Good evening, my name is Adam Jasa. We're going face to face with TVP World Editor-in-Chief Michał Broniatowski, who will look into his crystal ball.
Also, if you appreciate what I do, if you appreciate the only person, I guess, in this sphere of all people that talk about Ukraine, that report on Ukraine, talking about the topic of kidnapped children, which I'm pretty sure I'm the only person that does that to such a degree, consider throwing some support my way, because I am planning to travel within Ukraine and do a lot of things regarding this topic. But I cannot do it if I cannot afford to get a fixer, to pay them for gas and for their work. So this stream basically fuels what I do in Ukraine.
To tell us if 2026 is going to be any better than the year ending as we speak. Michał, welcome.
Thank you. I'm holding my
Crystal ball.
crystal ball. It's not very much crystal, but
Okay, well, to warm you up, I thought I will ask you to see what Giorgia Meloni, the Italian Prime Minister, offered as her cheerful assessment of where we stand.
The end of 2025 has been difficult for all of us. Don't worry, because next year will be much worse.
So judging from, she was joking, but...
oh, was she?
Yes, I think she was. But judging from your performance last time we spoke, doom and gloom, so...
So, you know, people who are in the know are saying the same thing. Whether they joke or not,
People who are in the know, so are you implying you're in the know?
no, she is in the know.
Ah, okay.
I am only using my crystal ball.
All right. So, maybe on a slightly more serious note, do you see any chance of peace in Ukraine
No.
2026?
As long as as the peace efforts are limited to meetings between the three presidents, but never together. The three presidents, I mean.
Yeah, it's very peculiar and very interesting situation when Putin has not met with Zelensky. In fact, Putin refuses to speak to Zelensky. Zelensky has several times tried to talk to Putin, but Putin has simply refused. So that's one aspect of the whole situation. It is very interesting that whenever Trump is about to talk to Zelensky, he always has a phone call with Putin before and after any such meeting. I guess he is getting briefed before the meeting with Zelensky, and then he reports how it went after. That is the only conclusion that I can come to.
Putin and Zelensky, as long as every meeting with Zelensky is preceded by Putin phoning 2 hours ahead of it.
There you go.
We will not see any end of hostility, and the only way is to keep fighting and get more weapons to not only defend against Russia, but to push it away at least a few kilometers, because now President Putin speaking to his generals, both.
In other words, Russia has to be deprived of this feeling that it is winning the war. Russia has to be deprived of this sense of victory, of superiority, and that it can dictate terms, and that it can stall peace talks and do whatever it wants. Oh, thank you, Glitchmaster, for the tier 3 subscription. Thank you very much. That was a good joke. She made me laugh. This year was awful. Fortunately, it gets worse before it gets better. How long will it be? I guess it's up to all of us. Thank you for the tier 3. Yes. There's a saying in Poland that my mom tends to use a lot. It's, don't worry, tomorrow will be worse. Okay? Be happy today. Tomorrow is gonna be much, much worse.
Posted that he managed to, that the army managed to capture during this year 300 of villages and small towns. It's, a total of about 20 kilometers at the expense of hundreds of thousands eliminated soldiers. It cannot continue, and it will not continue, definitely, if Ukraine is capable of counteracting even stronger.
Yeah, but that's an if. I wanted to play another clip regarding the...
There is very much an if, considering that Russia has better allies than Ukraine.
Peace negotiations, these negotiations in Florida.
In your conversation with President Putin, did you discuss what responsibility Russia will have for any kind of reconstruction of Ukraine post an agreement?
I did. They're going to be helping. Russia's going to be helping. Russia wants to see Ukraine succeed.
So obviously President Zelensky not entirely convinced, but a lot of commentators seize on comments from Trump like the one we just heard.
Also, it is very interesting to note that after the alleged assassination accusation from Putin, at first Trump was saying that he was shocked, that he was angry. He claimed not to believe that he said that maybe it didn't happen, but Putin told him that it did. And it seems like Trump has now finally accepted that Putin was lying about the supposed assassination attempt on his life, which was reflected in his Truth Social post that Russia is in fact the party that is standing in the way of peace. We will see if this will actually lead to anything, or again a bunch of hot air that means nothing. That is remain to be seen. Trump's words are very hard to be treated seriously, especially when in regards to the peace negotiation.
To say that Trump ignores reality and just repeats what Putin tells him. But some disagree. For example, Marcin Przydacz, who is the foreign policy advisor to the Polish president, Mr. Nawrocki, who is close to Mr. Trump, he says that Trump and his negotiators are painfully aware of the reality and they understand Russia, but they just concentrate on trying to win concessions from Putin. So Trump is avoiding saying anything that could annoy Putin, or if he wants to be sympathetic in order to bring him in. What do you say to that?
Naive.
You know, it's a lot of goodwill towards President Trump. There are two possibilities when he says that Russia wishes well to Ukraine. Either he's misinformed, or he's
stupid.
informed but playing fool, because
But the point is that this doesn't necessarily mean anything.
it means a lot, offending publicly the president of Ukraine, who is standing by and nearby, and you know, forcing him to smile, to laugh at the president of the.
But it outrages you. But you know, maybe for some other people it's not so outrageous. And in Ukraine, we had a number of guests this week commenting on this, and they said, well, it doesn't really matter because we're used to the fact that Trump says different things.
You know, this is just an indicator of what he thinks about this whole process. When you say,
Yeah, but that's just if people are saying, if people are not even angry anymore, and they're just saying that they're just used to Trump saying different things, then that's just an indicator of how much faith people put in what Trump says to begin with, and how much faith is being put in this peace negotiation by extension.
that he's trying to lure Putin into concessions. At the same time, he's forcing Zelensky to concessions. You know, it's not equal treatment.
Nope.
If not, stop the war where it is.
It is a preferential treatment towards Russia. We have been witnessing this the entirety of the year.
He will probably also agree for more concessions on the side of Ukraine, territorial concessions for Putin. But you know, we are not talking about a territory in which Ukrainians could give up this, because actually this part of Donetsk region is hilly, so it's and full of good concrete defenses built by Ukraine. If they give it up, then there is only a long.
Yeah, but both presidents admitted that this issue remained unresolved, and Zelensky.
Yeah, that we have been hearing this for months now, that peace is very close, but there is still a few crucial things to iron out. Yeah, we've been hearing that for a while now. We have been hearing this for quite a long time now.
Zelensky and others from the Ukrainian leadership said, you know, this is a non-starter. Nevertheless, both presidents said progress was made. So how do you?
I don't know what progress. You know, this is this diplomatic talk after every meeting, which brought nothing.
Well, there were worse meetings than that.
But so what? At this meeting, they at least didn't shout at Zelensky.
Right.
You
Maybe because J.D. Vance wasn't there.
Yes. No, he didn't kill him. Bravo.
Okay. But
There we go. We are witnessing the Polish sarcasm where it's had, the Slavic attitude.
at the same
He
time,
didn't
it
kill
seems
him.
many
Bravo.
in Putin's inner circle, particularly the business people around him who take part in these negotiations and actually lead the negotiations. Notice that Lavrov is absent, the foreign minister is absent from these negotiations. It's mostly business people. Just like on the Trump side, the business people are discussing this deal. And, you know, they seem to be arguing that it's time for peace also for Russia, because Russia is running out of resources. There is a BBC report this week saying Putin's attempt to take Malta.
Rebuilding Russia's economy would surely be a boon to Russia's children militarization effort and for the rebuilding of its military-industrial complex.
Territory in eastern Ukraine has led to soaring casualties. So they are saying, you know, there is some pressure on Putin as well to settle from his own people. And, you know, this is what even some Ukrainians who normally downplay Putin's readiness for serious peace are saying. And this is what General Budanov, head of intelligence, Ukrainian intelligence, had to say about this.
Since late spring, Russia has entered a stable economic recession. It's not a collapse yet, but the problems are mounting. Look at Russia's 2026 budget. It would be catastrophic for any country. All its social programs are being cut. The only thing left is defense spending. The decisions already taken are unpopular, painful and difficult. The 2026 budget...
Yeah, but the more this rears its ugly head, the more difficult it would be for Russia to switch from wartime economy to peacetime economy. That is something that is also worth discussing, the fact that Russia is screwed if it ends the war on the economy level.
It allocates 46% to war. No country can develop or move forward normally when nearly half of its budget is spent on war. It's simply impossible.
So if you add to this the fact that the oil price is tanking, so Russian revenues are down, you know, there is only so much magical thinking Putin can do.
If it were true, I would be as happy as you would be. But you better prepare for something worse, I think, because the talk about Russia collapsing economically has been around for the last 4 years. Immediately after they started the war, everybody was saying, oh, that they cannot afford it because they are too weak a country. And they survive. Of course, this also means even deeper dependence on China support and so on and so on. But I think that the main argument will be military might.
Well, of course, the problem is that China, so far, and North Korea and Iran are very happy to provide the support
On the front, and not any other arguments, even if business people around Putin himself, also a main businessman, are pushing.
Oh, he's a racketeer rather than a businessman.
In Russia, it's...
Okay, it's the same. But if you're so sure of Russia's invincibility, then...
I'm not sure about Russia's invincibility. I'm sure about Russia being intransigent. It doesn't mean that they are invincible. That's what I am proposing.
Yeah, but there are no takers. There are no takers. Trump is not going to, you know, it's painfully clear at this stage that the US is not going to exert any greater pressure on, Russia than...
But we now have Europe getting its act together.
Oh, now you are saying Europe is getting its act together.
We will
Last
see.
week you were arguing Europe was falling apart.
We will see if Europe will truly get its act together. I'm not sure. I'm not so sure of that myself. I am very skeptical of that claim, and I have grown bitter. That is the only thing that I can say. I have grown bitter about the conflict. I have grown bitter about the prospects of Europe getting its act together.
Europe is, Europe at least managed to give some money to it. And
Last week you said this was a disaster.
it was a disaster, political disaster.
Ah, I see. All right. Well, there is some subtlety I'm missing here.
Yes, you miss the subtlety of giving money and not giving money. There will be money.
You missed that subtlety when you were complaining about the EU last time.
No, the problem is that
That is such a Polish conversation that it's adorable. It's adorable just how very Polish this conversation is.
taking this blocked Russian assets to support Ukraine and its
it was a
war
better
effort,
solution.
This is a solution, and this is a right thing to do, rather than
Okay, so you made a moral assessment, but now you're talking about the war effort in Ukraine, and you're saying the Europeans are stepping up.
yes.
What evidence
it's not,
have you got of that?
Of what?
Of Europe stepping up to help Ukraine
Well, Ukraine,
win the war?
Europe is collecting money all the time more. It has money as the result to buy American weapons. It's also increasing its war shield.
Well, Europe has the biggest the biggest way that Europe has to get its act together, of course, is the streamlining of its military production. And I have not seen the evidence that Europe has made great strides to do that. Unless it does so, it will not be able to produce at scale. It will not be able to get as much as it could for how much it's spending. And those are very crucial things.
Properly. The year 2024 saw the largest since World War II growth in military spending in the world, and especially in Europe.
Military spending doesn't mean much if you cannot get enough bang for your buck, if it's all being diluted by individual states, military companies that produce lower quantities for a much bigger price.
We don't know yet the figures for 2025, but probably it'll be similar. And there is main thing that Europe is convinced that finally convinced, or at least majority of Europeans are convinced that Ukraine is fighting in our defense. And this is a good sign. And behavior of Mr. Trump is also forcing Europe to get together in defense.
But all the European leaders are also acknowledging that without US involvement, military involvement, but intelligence sharing...
I know, but if you have to live without it, 3 years ago, it was unimaginable. Today, I think without American support, Europe will, and Ukraine together with Europe, will be able to defend at least itself against Russians.
I'm not so sure. Europe is not ready. Poland, that is considered such a powerful country, would fall within a few weeks if Russia attacked it.
You're almost saying, and correct me if I'm reading you wrongly, but you're almost saying that Ukraine would be better off without Trump trying to negotiate peace.
Yes, it would be.
Trump is indispensable here. But if he continues being convinced that Russia is prepared to act in the interest of Ukraine, he won't be helpful. As long as he is there and there is a dialogue, fine. But it may well happen that one day he will simply say, if you don't take that, we cut everything.
Right. Okay, and would then be the right time for Ukraine to accept whatever terms there are? Just, like Finland had to do in 1939, in 1940, in 1945, at the end of the war, when they had to cede territory, they had to accept some restrictions on their freedom, but at the end of the day, they remained sovereign and part of the Western world.
After 80 years, Finland is in NATO.
Well, here you go. So maybe
yes, but
we need a pause to fight another day.
I think that slight Finland-like solution is unavoidable. But Finland's solution was that they stopped on a front line, and the Soviet Union didn't demand anything more. Here,
it took a huge chunk of
military, but they took it, but they didn't demand anything more. Here, they want to take the heavily
fortified
territory of
they don't
Ukraine.
have.
Without this territory, Ukraine is completely defenseless.
Okay, so let's move to Europe. You already mentioned some positive things, and I'm surprised that you're saying this after last week you gave us a full-throated criticism of the European Union. So
I was angry then.
You were angry, okay. But, you know, to be fair, I very often find it surprising that people who believe in the European project, who believe the European Union is a force for good and peace and prosperity and security on the continent, they very often criticize Europe and the European Union more than the Eurosceptics. So I'm just thinking that sometimes the Europhiles, and I include you in those numbers, are actually helping the Eurosceptics fuel their narrative.
I acknowledge, and I'm proud of being part of this, of the project which you called Peace and Prosperity. The problem is that European Union must become a security project. Security in terms of being strong enough to defend and stop the aggression. It was not the reason to create the European Union, and now Europe, the members of the Union.
Well, it was implicit in the first Treaty of Rome. It was implicit because it came right after the Second World War.
Yes, but they already.
And the idea was to cooperate, to lay the foundation for cooperation between Germany, France, and some other countries to prevent another war. So
to prevent Germany.
Was always there.
Yes, but you know, there was a talk of preventing another war, but Europe did nothing. And also, the Union has no the Union has no influence on military behavior of their members.
Well, hold on a second. It was the British, it was the Germans, it was the Americans who were saying the EU should not stride into defense because we have NATO.
Exactly. Now we don't have NATO.
Well, we still do.
Article 5-ish, I would say.
Okay.
There you go. There you go. This is the reality of the situation. This is how NATO is now being viewed in Poland. That is the harsh reality. The thing that I've been saying in 2022 when the war started, when people have been telling me, you know, if Poland were to be attacked, Article 5, NATO, everything's good. And already back in 2022, I said, I don't think so. I think that if Poland were to be attacked, the countries of Western Europe would say, we don't want to risk nuclear war over Poland. And now those people that have been saying that NATO is the ultimate guarantor of security are agreeing with me now that Trump is in office. Look at that.
Yes.
Listen to this.
Well, we still do.
We are, yes, Article 5-ish, I would say.
5-ish, Article 5.
NATO Secretary General Rutte last week said, those who think America is out of NATO are deeply mistaken.
I wish him good. If he is right, I'll be more than happy, but I'm afraid that you have to look on the other side of this coin.
Okay, but, you know, on the good side in Europe, you know, a huge dramatic change on German attitudes to
Trump has undermined the idea of NATO so much that people are very, very skeptical about Article 5 being an actual security guarantee at this point. The Article 5. And not to even mention this whole Article 5-like thing that Ukraine supposedly would get.
Russia. Huge rearmament programs everywhere in Europe. You mentioned that. You know, maybe even the car industry is going to be saved that way because some of these engineers can move to factories producing tanks and drones. So, you know, and the EU is spending hundreds of billions on defense. You know, there are EU funds, you know, and we're not talking about a few billion here and there. We're talking about hundreds. So Europe is on the move.
It is. That's why I'm saying that.
But this is completely different from what you were saying last week. I'm sorry I keep repeating this, but I'm just astonished.
No, it is not.
Okay. I wasn't listening carefully, right?
Yes. Europe as a union is still stumbling and from time to time disappointing people who are hoping for Europe to stand united against the threat from Russia, and at the same time being, being all the time disappointed by Mr. Trump. It is starting to
So
build.
Trump, again, as a catalyst of positive change.
Exactly.
All right.
Unluckily.
In a very
This is
negative
one
way, in a way that he undermined NATO, in the way that he undermines the peace talks in Ukraine, in the way that he pressures Ukraine and does not pressure Russia at all, that he enables Vladimir Putin to continue his aggression against Ukraine, that he has taken away any sort of leverage that it could provide for Ukraine in order to incentivize the end of the war. Yeah, Trump is all these things. Agreed.
More issue
Can you imagine
before
this Zeitenwende in Germany without this?
Correct. So finally, you're saying something positive about President Trump, and I salute you for it. There's one more issue I want to raise before we finish. Namely, it seems that whereas Europe has made a decision on Russia and is bolstering its defenses and all of that we just discussed, it still hasn't got an idea how to deal with China. Or does it?
No, it doesn't. We see this problem on our eyes. The first time since long time, China is having exercises with real weapons.
Well, your favorite President Trump just said that they keep having these drills and it doesn't matter.
Okay. Well, if it doesn't matter, then fine. But
it's not Europe's problem.
Let's use it as a reminder.
Europe's problem is mostly economic.
Of course. If there is a war and the production on Taiwan, which produces 90% of
even if
chips,
there is no war, there is a huge problem with China and Europe, because China is exporting everything it cannot export to the US to Europe, destroying Europe's industrial base. This seems to me the main challenge, apart from the fact that it supports Russia.
Well,
Of course.
China is a problem in any case.
Okay.
But if they may decide for a war on Taiwan because they see lack of decisiveness of Europe, among other things.
So you're now blaming Europe for...
I am not blaming Europe. I am just saying what is ahead of us in the next year, because China may be encouraged by this prolonged discussions
about Ukraine.
Exactly.
We have to finish here, Michał. Well, I'm not entirely sure you managed to cheer our viewers up with your outlook, but thank you anyway.
Thank you.
The goal was never to cheer anybody up, okay? The goal was to be painfully honest, to give a real evaluation of the situation, and I think that this person has managed to do just that. I think this person managed to give us a real overview of what's been happening and what is happening, and we're all fucked. What can I say? We are all fucked. But hey, don't worry. There's still a lot more work to be done. There is still a lot to do. Isn't that great? Maybe if things continue as they are, I'll be reporting from Poland about Polish kidnapped children. Wouldn't that be an exciting change of pace? I will not have to travel anywhere. I'll save money on the tickets. I'll save money on the accommodation. The war will come to me. Isn't that thrilling? All right, we've done this. How exciting. How exciting. Peace comes at a price. Polish president urges military self-reliance in New Year's speech, although he is very much a Eurosceptic and is against the unification and streamlining of European defense. So his words fall on deaf ears, as far as I'm concerned. As far as I'm concerned, his words fall on deaf ears. Yeah. Let's watch this. When Putin says we're not going to attack you, that is the warning of exactly where his tanks will go, and the drones will fly.
І мир повинен бути.
There must be peace.
І підтримка.
There must be support.
І сильна угода
And there must be a strong agreement.
повинна бути. І тоді
And then everything will work.
все спрацює. Чи розуміє це
Does Europe understand this?
Європа? Так. Чи розуміє це
Does all of Europe understand it? No, definitely not. Definitely not countries like, let me see, Hungary, Slovakia, the Czech Republic at this point, and Italy. I would count Italy at this.
вся Європа? Ні. І я не хочу, аби таке
And I do not want that understanding to come to everyone.
розуміння до всіх у Європі прийшло
In Europe one day, it's 4 in the morning,
одного дня, о 4 ранку,
the way it came to Ukraine.
так як це було в Україні. Я не хочу, аби
I do not want that understanding to be brought to Europeans
таке розуміння всім європейцям принесла те,
by armored vehicles with the letter Z on their streets. I mean, Europe seems adamant on making that happen, so maybe it should get what it wants. Maybe Europe should get what it wants, what it demands.
техніка з літерою Z на їхніх вулицях. І коли Путін каже, да не собираємося ми на вас нападать, це перший дзвіночок, куди саме поїдуть його танки і полетять його дрони. І ми маємо
And today we have every right to say this plainly.
повне право сьогодні казати. Україна
Ukraine is in fact the only shield that now separates
– це насправді єдиний щит, який зараз відділяє комфортне
Europe's comfortable way of life from the Russian world. And I mean, this has been a thing that has been known for a while now. I think Poland has understood this to a degree from the beginning. Poland now is at the point where any bad deal for Ukraine is considered a bad deal for Poland and a direct security threat to Poland, which is a good sign. It is a good sign to see that the Polish government is hitting the drums, that the Polish government is saying, we cannot accept, we cannot sign off on a bad deal for Ukraine, because that would be a bad deal for Poland as well.
європейське життя від руського міра. І мир повинен бути.
There must be
І підтримка.
peace. There must be peace. So yes. Oh my God. Yeah. I'm surprised there was no big New Year's attack on Ukraine, to be quite honest. I'm surprised that Kyiv has not been attacked by bombs, drones, etc. I am expecting more attacks to come in the upcoming days. I will be preparing to go to Ukraine soon again, and we will just have to see the developments as they happen. Let's see the New Year speech by Zelensky. Happy New Year, Ukraine.
Дорогі українці,
Dear Ukrainians.
дорогі українки, за декілька хвилин
In just a few minutes, the new year will begin. And what a year it will be. The year of continuous war. Because, as I've said before, I do not have any illusions that this war will end anytime soon. Maybe I'm a bitter person, maybe I'm just a bitter Polish person, but...
стане новий рік. Я віддав би
And I would give anything in the world
все на світі, щоб в цьому
if in this address I could say that peace
зверненні мати можливість сказати, що і мир настане.
will also come in just a few minutes. Also, again, people have been saying, Trump has been saying that he expects peace to be signed by New Year's. It is now New Year's. No peace has been signed. We are looking into a continuation of the conflict with all that it brings.
За декілька хвилин. На жаль, я
Unfortunately, I cannot say that yet.
поки що не можу цього зробити, але
But with a clear
з
conscience,
чистою совістю ми
all of us can say that Ukraine is truly
всі можемо сказати, що Україна точно робить
doing everything for peace
для миру все. І продовжує.
and continues to do so.
Я повернувся до
I
Києва
returned to
вчора.
Kyiv yesterday at 6 a.m. Actually, Zelensky has been doing some very smart moves. Unfortunately, those amount to nothing if the United States is not really willing to do what it has to do in order to bring Russia to the negotiation table in a meaningful way. But still, some real efforts have been done by Zelensky, like the offer to conduct a referendum if Russia agrees to a 60-day ceasefire.
О 6 ранку наша команда
Our team spent nearly 50 hours on the road.
провела у дорозі майже 50 годин. Мирна
The peace agreement is 90% ready.
угода готова на 90%. Лишається
10% remains.
10. І це
And that is far more than just numbers. It is far more than just numbers. Those are the most crucial parts of the negotiation. Things like territory, things like security guarantees. Very sadly, I am to report, I have to repeat that the return of the Ukrainian children is not taken very seriously, to the point where Zelensky said that there is absolutely no guarantee that if peace should be signed, that the Ukrainian children will be returned. Absolutely no guarantee whatsoever.
значно більше, ніж просто цифри. Це 10%,
Those 10% contain, in fact, everything.
у яких насправді все. Це про
Those are the 10% that will determine the fate of peace.
10%, які визначатимуть долю миру, долю
The fate of Ukraine and Europe, how people will live.
України і Європи. Те, як житимуть люди. 10%
10% to save millions of lives from occupation because territorial disputes.
для збереження мільйонів життів.
10% of the determination needed for peace.
10% рішучості, яка потрібна, аби мир запрацював
To work 100%.
на всі 100. 10%
10% of the unity and wisdom so desperately needed.
такої необхідної єдності і мудрості української
Ukrainian, American, European, from the entire world.
Американською, європейською, всього світу. 10%
10% to peace.
до миру. Я хочу,
I want all of us to be on the same page right
аби
now
всі ми з вами були зараз на одній хвилі, однаково
to understand reality in the same way,
розуміли реальність, були
to
озброєні
be armed not only on the battlefield,
і не тільки на полі бою, були
but
озброєні
also with the truth.
правдою. Проте,
The truth about who truly wants what. And, of course, in this is implied that Russia does not want peace, that Russia will invent assassinations against Putin to stall peace in order to push more demands, in order to give itself leeway for harsher attitudes towards Ukraine. Russia does not want peace. Russia wants to use this peace negotiation in order to further its goals. And its goals include the total control over Ukrainian territory, not just the Donbass. The Donbass is just a beginning for Russia, which is why, again, Russia is mass militarizing children. Russia is militarizing children en masse. We have already heard today that about 500,000 Ukrainian children are projected to be militarized by the Russian Federation. So that is part of answering the question of who wants what in this conflict, who wants peace and who wants further conflict far past Putin's lifetime.
то
Because those children that are militarized now are being groomed to grow up to be soldiers for Russia long past Putin's death.
чого насправді хоче?
The truth about who truly wants what.
Чого хоче Україна?
What does Ukraine want?
Чого хоче
What
Америка?
does America want? And I think it's becoming increasingly clear what America wants. America wants access to Russian resources, and Russia is not very good at refining or excavating some of these resources, which is why America, Donald Trump's America, feels that Russia needs it in order to do business with those resources.
Чого хоче
What does Russia want?
Росія? Чого хоче
What do Europe and the entire world want?
Європа і весь світ? Почнемо
Let us begin with the most important thing.
з найголовнішого. Чого
What does Ukraine want?
хоче Україна? Миру?
Peace?
Так.
Yes.
Чи будь-якою
At any cost? No.
ціною? Ні. Ми хочемо
We
закінчення
we want the end of the war,
війни, але не закінчення
not the end of Ukraine.
України. Чи втомились
Are we tired? Yes.
ми сильно? Чи значить
Does
це,
that mean we are ready to surrender?
що ми готові здатись? Сильно
Those who think so are deeply mistaken.
помиляється той, хто так думає, і він
And clearly over all these years,
очевидно за всі ці роки так і не зрозумів,
they still have not understood who Ukrainians are.
хто такі українці. Народ,
A people who have held
який тримається
on through 1,407 days of a full-scale war,
1407 днів повномасштабної війни. Просто усвідомте
just take in that number.
ці цифри. Це більше,
That is longer than the Nazi occupation
нацистська окупація багатьох наших міст
of many of our cities during World War II. I'm pretty sure it is not longer than the Nazi occupation of Poland, though. One moment. Oh yeah, 6 years. So yeah, not quite the number of years of the occupation of Poland.
міст у Другу світову.
1,407 days of unconquered Ukraine.
407 днів нескореної України, яка
A
фактично
country that in effect spends every night in shelters,
щоночі в укритті, щодня в боротьбі,
every day in struggle,
нерідко без світла,
often without electricity,
нерідко
often without sleep, holding positions for many, many days.
без сну і багато днів на позиціях, багато. Але завжди
Yet always without panic, without chaos, without division. That is nice to say for a New Year's speech, but there's definitely some division. There is definitely some chaos. There's definitely some things that can be said about these things. Okay?
без паніки, без хаосу,
Panic.
без розбрату, у єдності,
In unity so that we can have peace.
аби бути з миром. Чи хочемо ми, аби
Do we want to end? Do we want the war to end?
війна закінчилась? Безумовно.
Absolutely.
Чому цього
Why has it not happened
досі
yet?
не сталося? Відповідь
The answer is right next door to our country.
по сусідству з нашою державою. Чи може
Can
Росія
Russia end the war?
закінчити війну? Так.
Yes.
Чи хоче вона
Does it want to?
цього? Ні.
No.
Чи може світ
Can the world force it to do so?
примусити її до цього? Так.
Yes. And only that way will work. In other words, empty conversations between Trump, Zelensky, Trump, Putin. It seems like the Zelensky-Putin talk will not happen anytime soon. In all these configurations, they will lead to nothing, and only the pressuring of Russia to coming to the negotiation table can make any sort of difference happen.
І тільки так це спрацює. Чому
Why does the world not do this to the full extent?
світ не робить це повною мірою?
Because it's afraid of nuclear escalation, because Trump wants to do business with the United States, with Russia. It's just, there are many different reasons why the world is not helping, the West is not helping Ukraine to the full extent that it could.
Давайте розберемось.
Let us break it down step by
По
step.
порядку, по-чесному, так як
Honestly, as it truly is. I'm not sure if Zelensky will actually do it. I'm not sure if Zelensky actually is in a position to break it down honestly and harshly as he should.
так як воно є. Наш народ
Our people know this better than
знає
anyone.
це найкраще. Росія не
Russia does not end its war on its own. Yeah,
закінчує свої війни сама. Не було в історії війни,
there has never been a war in history
яку б вони завершили
that they ended of their own free will.
за власним бажанням. Лише тиск від
Only pressure from others, only coercion from others,
інших, лише примус від інших, які
which they themselves call a goodwill gesture.
самі вони називають жест доброї волі. Так було в усі
This has been the case every year Russia has fought at someone.
роки, коли Росія з кимось воювала, тобто в усі
That is throughout its entire
роки
existence.
її існування. Це можуть підтвердити
This can be confirmed by everyone against whom Moscow
всі, на кого в різні часи Москва війною
has waged war at different times, Poland included.
йшла. Польща, Туреччина,
Poland, Turkey, Finland, Syria, Georgia, Abkhazia, Ossetia,
Фінляндія, Сирія, Грузія, Абхазія, Осетія, Чечня і цей
Chechnya, and the list can go on endlessly because
список
almost
можна продовжувати безкінечно, бо майже вся
the entire territory of Russia was assembled through wars.
територія Росії зібрана з воєн.
Well, to be fair, the partitions of the Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth did not happen through war. That conquest happened without war, to be fair.
Ось з ким ми
This is who we are dealing with.
маємо справу. Ми.
We, Ukraine, Europe, the United States, and the entire world. The United States is not interested in conflict with Russia. It is interested in business with Russia.
Це Україна. Це Європа. Америка. Весь світ. Вийдіть із
Withdraw from Donbass and everything will be over.
Донбаса і все закончиться. Так, у
That is how deception sounds when translated from Russia, from the Russian language.
перекладі з російської звучить обман. У перекладі на
Into Ukrainian, into English, into German, into French.
українську, на англійську, німецьку, французьку та, власне, будь-яку
And in fact, into any language in the world.
мову світу. Невже тоді
Does anyone still believe them?
їм досі хтось вірить? На жаль.
Unfortunately.
Бо досі надто
Because too often the truth is still avoided and called.
часто правди уникають, називають це дипломатією,
Diplomacy, though in reality it is simply lies and suits.
хоча це просто брехня в костюмах. І тому на
That is why there is pressure on Ukraine, yes.
Україну тиск, так. І тому ми
That is why we keep fighting the way we do.
боремось так і доводимо,
And proving what should have been obvious long ago.
здавалося б, давно очевидні істини, що після
That after the occupation of Crimea, the seizure of parts
окупації Криму, захоплення частини Донеччини і
of Donetsk and Luhansk regions, the full-scale invasion
Луганщини, повномасштабного вторгнення
on February 24th after Bucha, Mariupol, Olenivka,
24 лютого, після Бучі, Маріуполя, Оленівки і всього, що
and everything the Kremlin has been doing all along.
робить Кремль весь цей час. Вірити їм
Taking them at their word is nothing less than a verdict.
на слово – це просто вирок. Вирок
A verdict against shared international security.
спільній міжнародній безпеці. І кожному
against-
лідеру, який просто має
Every leader whose duty is simply
захищати свій народ.
to protect their people.
Чи були ці
Have our arguments been heard?
і наші аргументи почуті?
Not exactly.
Дуже сподіваємося.
We very much hope so.
Чи погодилися
Have they agreed with us?
з нами?
Not exactly.
Не повністю. Поки що.
Not
І
yet.
саме тому ми
That is precisely why for now we speak of 90%,
поки що кажемо про 90, а не всі 100%
not the full 100% readiness of a peace agreement.
готовності мирної угоди. Наміри
Intentions must become security guarantees.
повинні стати гарантіями.
Already, NATO's actual Article 5 became a very fragile security guarantee for NATO members. So the quasi Article 5 seems to be weaker than ever in my eyes,
Безпеки.
and therefore be ratified
А отже, бути ратифіковані Конгресом
by the US Congress, by European parliaments, by all partners.
Сполучених Штатів, європейськими парламентами,
Russia will never agree to that, by the way. Russia will reject such a plan outright, without hesitation.
усіма партнерами.
A
Будапештський
Budapest-style piece of paper will not satisfy Ukraine, and it should not. It should not satisfy anybody.
папірець Україну не влаштує. Мінська
Ukraine does not need a Minsk-style, meticulously drafted trap.
ювелірно виписана пастка Україні не потрібна. Підписи
Signatures under weak agreements only fuel war.
під слабкими угодами тільки підживлюють війну. Мій
My signature will be under a strong
підпис
agreement.
стоятиме під сильною угодою. І саме про
And that is exactly what every
це
meeting,
зараз. Кожна зустріч, кожен дзвінок, кожне рішення,
every call, every decision is about right now.
щоб
To
забезпечити
secure a strong peace for everyone.
всім сильний мир. Не на добу,
Not for a day, not for a week, not for 2 months.
тиждень чи 2 місяці. Мир
Peace for years.
на роки. І тільки тоді
Only then will it truly be a success. For a few years until Russia decides to attack again, I suppose.
це дійсно успіх України, Америки,
For Ukraine, for America, for Europe.
Європи, насправді кожного
And in truth, for every nation that wants to
народу,
live,
який хоче жити, а не воювати.
not to fight.
Я казав про це
I said this to President Trump.
президенту Трампу, казав під час
I said it during our first meeting,
першої зустрічі, коли все могло
when
закінчитись
everything would have ended in a storm for all of us,
штормом для усіх нас. І під
and
час
during our recent meeting,
нещодавньої зустрічі, яка дає надію нам усім
which gives hope to us all.
на те, що мир
Hope that peace is close, more possible than ever. I do not believe that. I am far more skeptical about that claim. I think that peace is actually not far closer than ever. I think we are entering just another year of war.
близько, він як ніколи можливий, і ми здатні
And that we are capable of securing it together.
забезпечити це разом.
There needs to be a
Скажу
will for that.
чесно, було
And I will be honest, it was not easy at all. It's far from over. Because Russia has to agree to it, that 10% has to be ironed out and is not even close to being done. I do not share Zelensky's optimism about peace being very close.
зовсім непросто досягти такої зміни
To achieve such a change in the tone of relations
градусу у відносинах України
between Ukraine and the United
і
States.
Сполучених Штатів. Від першого
From the first meeting in the Oval Office,
овального кабінету та усіх гостей
while all its tense moments, to the conversation at Mar-a-Lago,
кутів у ньому
which led to nowhere, I will remind. It led to no agreements, it led to no breakthroughs, it led to another meeting that was effectively a waste of time, as far as I'm concerned,
до розмови у Мар-а-Лаго, яка
which
засвідчила
made one thing clear.
факт: без України нічого не
Without Ukraine, nothing will work.
вийде. Україна
Ukraine has defended its right to have a voice,
відстояла своє право голосу. І всі бачать, що
and everyone can see that Ukraine respects itself.
Україна себе поважає, а тому поважає
And that is why we are respected. Ukraine is respected. I am not sure if Ukraine is respected. I'm not sure if Poland is. I'm not sure if any of the countries in this region of the world are truly respected, to be quite honest.
нас, поважають Україну. І найбільш
And
очевидний
the
доказ
most obvious proof of this is the 7 meetings
цього 7 зустрічей, які були у мене
I had this year with the President of the United States. That's not a proof. That's not evidence of respect.
цьогоріч з президентом Америки, в якій ви точно
And no matter where in the world we meet,
зі світу ми не бачились, Вашингтон, Нью-Йорк,
Washington, New York, The Hague, the Vatican,
Гага, Ватикан, президент США
the US president always mentions our people.
завжди згадує про наш народ.
I think Trump respects Russia more than he respects Ukraine, to be quite honest. He definitely respects Vladimir Putin more than he respects Zelensky.
Каже про
And talks about how bravely Ukrainians are fighting. Empty words,
те,
empty platitudes.
як відважно українці б'ються.
If he respected the Ukrainian people so much, then he would send more anti-air to defend Ukrainian cities. Actions speak louder than words.
І для всього світу
And
така
for the entire world, such recognition of Ukrainians had become essential.
згадка про українців стала обов'язковою. І це щастя.
It is a joy to hear this,
Щастя таке чути. Це гордість
and a great pride to be the president of such a people,
бути президентом такого народу і такої держави,
and of such a state.
яка вистояла
A state that has stood firm and can reach
і досягає до будь-якого ворожого військового
an enemy military target, an oil refinery,
об'єкту
the real sanctions,
та НПЗ, повертає війну
that brings the war back to
в
Russia
Росію, навчає
and teaches NATO militaries what modern drones are.
військових НАТО, що таке сучасні дрони,
Reminder that NATO lacks the drone capacity that Ukraine currently possesses,
яка дає асиметричного
that delivers an asymmetric blow to Russia
ляпасу Росії та змушує
and forces Putin to lie,
Путіна брехати, що він
claiming that he has taken Kupiansk 3 times
тричі взяв Куп'янськ і збивав дрони
and
біля
personally shot down drones near his own residence.
своєї резиденції власними руками. Україна, яка
A
має
Ukraine that has mature foresight and its own
зрілу далекоглядність, має власну
long-range capabilities and therefore has arguments,
далекобійність, а тому має аргументи, має мудрість,
that has wisdom and dignity,
гідність і готова
and that is ready for compromise but not for shame.
до компромісу, але не до сорому. Я дякую кожному
And I thank every leader who supports Ukraine in this
лідеру, хто Україну в цьому підтримує, хто розуміє,
and who understands the most important thing.
і найголовніше, сьогодні є тільки
Today, there are only two options.
два варіанти. І тільки
Either the world stops Russia's war,
або світ зупинить війну Росії, або Росія
or Russia drags the world into its war, which is what Russia is actively preparing for as we speak during its via its policy. Vladimir says, this interview is a joke, an attempt to justify the Glaze session for Trump. Nobody cares about the words that been said until drones are still flying. Yeah.
Росія затягне світ в свою війну.
Yeah, I do not share this sort of optimism that is being sold in this speech.
І це шок.
And this is shocking. Shocking that after so many wars,
Шок, що після стількох воєн, після 4 років такої
after 4 years of such a war in Ukraine, in Europe,
війни в Україні, в Європі, на жаль,
we'll still unfortunately have to explain this to many.
доводиться це пояснювати багатьом. Ми пояснюємо, повторюємо.
And explain it, we repeat it, and even as leaders change.
І навіть вже змінюються лідери, а питання ті
The
самі.
questions remain the same.
Чи здатна
Is America capable of stopping the
Америка
aggressor
зупинити агресора дуже швидко?
quickly and decisively? It's not about America being able to do it. The real question is America willing to do it? And the answer is increasingly, well, no. No, Trump does not want to really decisively end it. Because if he did, then he definitely has the tools to do so. But Trump doesn't just want to end the war. He wants to end it in a way that will open the path to business. That is what he wants.
Швидко і рішуче. Однозначно.
He does not want to undermine business opportunity. That is why he is not being more decisive.
Чи хотілося б
Would we want
нам
that?
цього дуже?
Very much.
А коли це можливо?
When is it possible? Always.
Завжди. А коли це потрібно?
And when is it
Ну,
needed?
вам. Та ще вчора нам
We needed it back yesterday.
це потрібно. І в 26-му
And in 2026, it is possible.
році це
Vladimir says, the most shocking part to me is that he is still glazing Trump even in his address to the nation. I mean, he has to. He does not have many alternatives apart from glazing Trump, considering that Trump is a moody, horrible person that could listen to Zelensky, not glaze him, and decide, okay, I'm gonna be really shitty to Ukraine now that Zelensky is not glazing me anymore.
можливо. Санкції
Sanctions are in place. We are grateful.
є. Ми вдячні. Санкції кусають Росію.
Sanctions
Але
are biting Russia, but only an iron grip will work.
спрацює тільки мертва хватка. Російська
Russian oil is already cheap, but their
нафта вже
tankers
дешевша. Але Їхні танкери мають
must be stopped completely for the war to stop,
зупинитись повністю.
which is something that the West is not willing to do, by the way. Stopping the shadow fleet completely.
Аби зупинилася війна.
Russian plans already slowing
Російські
down,
заводи вже гальмують, але повинні стояти,
but they must be brought to a halt
щоб окупант не рухався.
so that the occupier cannot advance.
І томагавки в українських руках.
And tomahawks in Ukraine hands would prove only one thing. Ukraine is not getting tomahawks. That's just no way that Ukraine will be getting tomahawks.
Довели б насправді тільки одне. Мир
Peace has no alternative.
не має альтернативи. І мир
There
повинен
must be peace.
бути. І підтримка.
There must be support.
І сильна угода
And there must be a strong agreement.
повинна бути. І тоді
And then everything will work.
все спрацює. Чи розуміє
Does Europe understand this?
це Європа? Так.
Yes.
Чи розуміє це
Does all of Europe understand it?
вся Європа?
No.
Ні. І я не хочу, аби таке
And I note,
розуміння до всіх у
it
Європі
looping?
прийшло одного дня, о 4:00 ранку, так, як це було в
oh, it loops now. Is this a loop?
Путін каже, де не собираємося, ми,
It's
що
loop.
треба зустрічатись одразу після Нового року. Не треба робити ніяк.
Well, that's it. That was interesting. That was an interesting speech. All right. We have done a few topics. I've done the most important topic that I wanted to talk about, the Ukrainian children. I think I will be doing at least one topic regarding Ukrainian children every stream because, again, very much a topic that has been underreported, neglected. I will be talking about it daily moving forward. All right. Let's see who I can raid you to. Right. See you. I'll see you. Bye-bye.